Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the African events teams at IPI, I'm really very pleased to welcome all of you to this important panel discussion entitled Relapse into Conflict, the Central African Republic and the Future of United Nations Peacebuilding. And this is a peace-building week at the UN, and I want to thank the Peacebuilding Commission and Support Office for proposing this meeting, and the Permanent Mission of Italy, Ambassador Cardi, for their support for today's event. We're really very, very privileged to have with us the Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations, Mr. Jan Eliasson, a good friend of IPI, and Ambassador Sebastiano Cardi, the permanent representative of Italy to the United Nations, also the permanent representative of Morocco, Ambassador Hilali, who has joined us. They all recognize the importance of this moment for the future of the Central African Republic as the United Nations prepares to deploy a new peacekeeping force. So before introducing the panel here, my very distinguished panel, I want to give both the Deputy Secretary General and Ambassador Cardi the opportunity to make some welcoming remarks for all of us. So,
thank you very much, dear John, and chair of this meeting, and Ambassador Cardi for taking this initiative. You should have brought us to a bigger room. I think you have standing room audience there, and I hope that you will stay for the duration. But this great interest that is shown is a sign, I think, of the good choice of the subject, which is absolutely crucial. I'm very glad to have you, Minister, welcome, and to meet all my friends, both on the panel and in the audience. I think this forum is giving concrete meaning to today's commemoration. Today is Peacebuilding Day. So let's keep that in mind, that this is our mission to do peacebuilding in Central African Republic. I'm proud to have been involved in the establishment of the Peacebuilding Commission as President of the General Assembly in 2005 and 6. And I recall its founding mission being, as you know, to help states avoid a relapse into conflict. There is science showing that in a great number of cases, maybe even half of the conflicts of the last 25 years, they are indeed relapsing in different ways into conflict. And the Central African Republic is a tragic example of this. I'm glad to see Margaret Vogt, by the way, one of our most prominent colleagues in the UN, who was special representative in the Central African Republic. I remember calling you on the phone when things were exploding around you in Bangui. The Central African Republic has been on the Peacebuilding Commission's agenda since 2008, and we are all now aware that it is in the midst of a tragic relapse into conflict. Thus, our discussions here today are not academic. We are here to identify lessons for the Central African Republic and beyond to avoid similar relapses in the future. Let me suggest two questions to frame today's discussions. First, how can we best ensure that regional dynamics involving Central Africa's neighbors, CAR's neighbors and regional organizations are supportive of CAR's efforts to achieve sustainable peace? How can we develop regional dynamics to help preserve peace and restore peace? And secondly, how can the international community, not least the United Nations, more effectively ensure the creation of responsible and inclusive state institutions in CAR today and in the future? Because we must always remember it is the capacity of the nation itself to bring out the resources and capabilities that in the end will decide whether this will have lasting effects. These efforts will have lasting effects. I have a great respect for the expertise in this room. I know in this room we have governments represented who follow developments very closely. I know we have international organizations, of course. We have the civil society and the NGO community. And I would say in this case, I would raise expectations on civil society and NGOs. I think those sectors in Central African Republic, in the communities, among the religious community and community leaders, is absolutely crucial to restore peaceful conditions in the country. So I count on you to share your practical ideas how the international community can create conditions for stability in Central African Republic. And let us remember, this country is at the nerve center of Africa. And we must understand that in the end, the country itself must be able to escape the vicious circles of instability and enjoy the peace and prosperity its people long for and deserve. I'll say a few words about the Peace-Building Commission's role, particularly on this day of peace building. The Peace-Building Commission is fundamentally an expression of international solidarity. When we were negotiating the draft Peace-Building Commission resolution, and I was President of the General Assembly, in the fall of 2005, we said it was historic. For the first time in the history of the UN, we were creating a mechanism which was to ensure that for countries emerging from war, post-conflict does not mean post-engagement. Post-conflict does not mean post-engagement of the international community. And in this case, we tried also to develop almost a constitutional innovation. The Peace-Building Commission was supposed to be an organ which was related directly and strongly to both the Security Council and the General Assembly. And in fact, I recall we even wanted to have it equally related to ECOSOC, so that it would be a unifying body. We've had some years now of establishing it. It's been a rather difficult journey, but I think we are now on the road of creating a strong organ in this respect of really meaningfully taking measures to end relapsing into conflicts. We had a meeting this morning opening up the Peace Building Day, and I feel very strongly that the leadership of the Brazilian permanent representative, Ambassador Patriota, will make a difference, and there are plenty of interesting ideas coming up. And also tomorrow there will be a funding meeting for peace building, the Peace Building Fund. The Central African Republic has been plagued by decades of instability and fighting, as we all know. The UN system and the member states must reflect on what more we could have done to ensure that the country avoided a relapse into conflict. We must learn from the past as we look ahead to make sure that the Central African Republic emerges from this crisis on a more sustainable footing. And here I'd like to say that we have now established, as many of you know, the initiative of Rights Up Front, where we want to sort of, in the situations where we have serious human rights violations, we want to act at that stage rather than waiting for the mass atrocities to occur. And this is a qualitative new initiative which I hope will be supported both by member states and by civil society, because we can really make a difference. And I must admit openly that in the case of Central African Republic, we did not act on early warning. We acted on late warning, and Margaret Vogt is the first one to confirm this. But we acted and in fact mobilized support to a degree that at least avoided the worst forms of atrocities, although we have seen some signs of this going on. And above all, we've seen religious cleansing, which is, of course, a very, very troubling element. After the violence resumed last year, partners moved in to help. Neighboring states, regional organizations, and others have worked to assist Central African Republic, including by deploying international peacekeeping troops. The MISCA troops are there now, as you know. As I said, the Rights Up Front came late to CAR, but still our vigorous advocacy, I would claim, helped galvanize substantial force generation and later galvanized the Security Council into authorizing a UN peacekeeping operation to take over from the AU-led mission MISCA in September. Now, CAR faces a multifaceted crisis with regional implications. We need an innovative and comprehensive response based on long-term commitment. And the Peacebuilding Commission can make a significant contribution by mobilizing resources, sustaining international attention, and forging coherence. These elements are absolutely critical, and today's meeting and the interest so clearly demonstrated in this room certainly shows that we are doing our best at least to sustain international attention. And in particular, the Peacebuilding Commission can now help bring together key stakeholders, including neighboring countries, to ensure a regional environment that is conducive for peace. Today's discussion here today gives us an opportunity to outline a framework for how we can all make a real and lasting difference for the people of Central African Republic. Peace will depend on more than mechanisms and resolutions. Peace, in the end, depends on people. The Prime Minister of Central African Republic, Andre Nassar-Pakeye, whom I met in Addis recently, said, "Peace doesn't come by a plane or by a car from somewhere else. Peace is a behavior. Peace is awareness of the way you act towards the other." So we really need, he said, to make sure that every individual, every family is aware and conscious of its role as an actor, as a peace agent, end of quote. So let us help empower the people of the Central African Republic for the sake of their country, for the sake of the region, and I say for the sake of our world, because what is going on here has implications for international security, and above all, the way we react from the international community to make sure that, first of all, conflicts do not erupt at all, but if they erupt, that they don't relapse again. It's a huge task, which we should make a joint task in the name of really making serious prevention. So I thank you very much, and I look forward to continued discussions.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Hirsch. First of all, I'd like to say that, I would like to commend IPI for being such a great partner on a number of events we have organized. I think we should hire you on a permanent basis because, such a packed house, it's difficult to see it at the UN, so congratulations. And we are very happy since we have been sponsoring together with you, and we would like to thank very much the Deputy Secretary General, Jan Eliasson, for being here today, and the Ambassador of Morocco, Chairman of the configuration of the Peacebuilding Commission for Central African Republic, and the distinguished panelists, which are really important. Probably they have the right words for us to understand what's going on there. Ladies and gentlemen, and excellencies. So the other thing I would like to add is that we are following very, very closely the works of the Peacebuilding Commission. This morning we were at the opening. Ambassador Patriota was, of course, the chair of the Peacebuilding Commission. It's, of course, a crucial element of the UN role for peace and stability. We are not part, as I said. We hope to become, again, part of the Peacebuilding Commission soon, Italy. We would like to continue to work together with the other countries and the countries involved to try to establish, a way forward for security, as I said, and stability. And I think you are doing, Antonio, you're doing a great job there, also as chair of the configuration for Guinea-Bissau, I think. So I'm happy to see such an important panel today, as I said, and a big audience, considering the humanitarian urge of the topic we are dealing with. The situation in the Central African Republic is, of course, we know that very well, it's dramatic. And it should prompt us to find solutions that attack the root causes of the recurring crisis afflicting the country. We had also in January an interesting panel at the Security Council on how not to relapse into war, into conflict. And there were some interesting ideas came out from this debate. Today, this already complex crisis is aggravated by unprecedented new developments. A religious clash being exploited by the parties for political ends is opening up deep wounds and standing in the way of national reconciliation. This is leading to a de facto breakup of the country along ethnic and religious lines. This is something that we have seen before. And of course, it led to very, very dramatic events that must at all costs be avoided this time. It is of the utmost urgency, therefore, that we act to prevent any further deterioration of the humanitarian situation on the ground. This is an immense effort that must be made by the countries of the region, the United Nations, and the whole international community. But of course, first and foremost, by the Central African Republic authorities and the people of the country, who need to demonstrate a political will to overcome the differences. So, of course, as we said, and as it will be debated probably today, an integrated, coordinated approach is needed to address the multiple aspects of this difficult crisis. They should combine both a short-term perspective, the cessation of violence, of course, first, humanitarian relief, and resume functioning of public administration, which is key for the rebirth of every nation. And a mid to long-term perspective involving inter alia development and national reconciliation. Such an approach is reflected in the MINUSCA mandate. Through peacekeeping experience, we have long known that it is penny-wise but pound-foolish to forego investment into assuring durable peace. It is thus incumbent upon us to help the affected countries find in themselves the capability of preventing a relapse. Now, I should add that it is important that both the Peace Building Commission, the United Nations, the national governments, as Italy and others, are able to enlarge the scope of the deliberation to some very key players on the ground. Not always governmental players, sometimes NGOs are very important. We have here Professor Bartoli, who is the affiliated, at least certainly, with the Comunità Sant'Egidio, who has been doing a lot in Africa in some crises, having a lot also of success in, bridging the gaps, fostering national reconciliation, certainly in Mozambique and in other countries. And I know that you are working also with the people and the authorities of Central African republics and elsewhere to try to bring together the various elements of the nation. And I think it is really important that, organizations such as Peace Building Commission are able to enlarge the scope of their cooperation, not only with state actors, but also with private and non-state actors. So the countries of the region should continue to support Central African Republic, of course, in a constructive spirit and with the awareness of the regional implications, was said before by the Deputy Secretary General, of a permanent crisis in the country. It's a process that will take time and thus require a constant, ongoing effort that cannot slacken after the emergency phase has lessened, hopefully. National reconciliation will demand a reckoning with accountability and the heinous crimes committed. Ultimately, this is a decision that rests with the people of the Central African Republic. But the idea of a general amnesty for the most serious crimes, we think, is unthinkable. We also feel it is crucial that during the first half of 2015, election be held. Also that a genuine interreligious dialogue begins. You know that there is a European Union mission in CAR, in the Central African Republic. It's to be considered a bridging operation that will facilitate the later deployment of the UN force MINUSCA mission in September. Italy has been committed to contribute some units, both men and women, to U4 CAR, as we call it, which is an engineering platoon to support the deployment and the maneuver and staff position at forces quarters in Bangui. This is, of course, the military side of the operation, but we would like to see a lot of the civilian side of the civilian dialogue going on. So also indispensable, military deployment, as I said, is not enough. We have to keep on thinking about Central African Republic from a peace-building perspective. At the current juncture, we need to analyze past experiences and peace-building operations in order to learn from our collective efforts as members of the international community. If we truly grasp why, for example, peace is returning to the Sierra Leone and not for the moment to the Central African Republic, we can build upon what has worked and shift away from what has not. Peace building may not have a one-size-fits-all definition or methodology, of course, but in the years since the creation of the Commission, the Peace Building Commission, we have accumulated a critical mass of experience through UN efforts to help countries return to sustainable peace. Many of these experiences involve in fact, situation where a recurrence of a conflict was not prevented. Unfortunately, the Central African Republic is a case in point. So it is our hope, it must be our hope, that this prestigious panel, the permanent mission of Italy organized today together with our friends, with the help of the IPI and the Peace Building Support Office, may give some real contribution on analyzing what the UN system and the international community should have done better. And most important, what we shall do better to really help the people of the Central African Republic find the path to peace and a serene future. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Well, Ambassador Carty, thank you very much. Many of you are here today. We're also here about 3 months ago, and we had another meeting in this very room on the Central African Republic with 3 faith leaders. And today we are very privileged to have this panel, and I particularly want to welcome Madame Emily Beatrice Epée, who is a member of the Central African Republic's National Transitional Council. She's come all the way from Bangui to be with us, as well as to attend a few other meetings. She's an independent member of the council. She is also the vice president of the Parliament of the Economic and Monetary Community of Central Africa, and really interestingly serves as the president of the association Voice of the Heart, Voix de la Coeur. So she's really brings together a kind of an economic, political perception and a humanitarian approach. So it's really a great honor to have you with us. I also want to welcome my good friends, Joao Hanwana, who is currently the director of Africa 2 in the Department of Political Affairs. I've been working on African issues for at least 20 years. And similarly, Professor Andrea Bartoli, currently the Dean of the School of Diplomacy and International Relations at Seton Hall University, with a distinguished academic career, and their full biographies are in your papers here. So the title of this meeting is very stark: Relapse into Conflict. The Central African Republic is at a moment of transition when, for the moment anyway, the attention of the international community is focused on the state's virtual collapse and the ensuing violence which has engulfed the country for many months, if not longer. A United Nations peacekeeping force, MINUSCA, is set to succeed MISCA, the African Union peacekeeping force, this September. And many of the troops will be rehatted, and others will come in, and an election is scheduled for next February. But it seems to me that these are steps and not solutions. And the steps focus mainly on security. So a recent report by the International Crisis Group, which many of you may have seen, urges parallel attention to reviving the country's economy, to obtaining control over diamond and gold mining in order to end corruption by some version of the Kimberley process, and suggesting the establishment of a dual external monitoring of government expenditures, as has been done in Liberia. So they offer some very concrete ideas over and above putting the troops on the ground. And I also want to say to you that international attention will not remain for long, given the other crises on the international agenda. And all each of you has to do is open this morning's newspaper to understand this. I'm sure you all do. So it behooves both the leaders of the Central African Republic and those concerned about the country's future to think hard and carefully now about these and other recommendations, and to consider what they can and need to do now to avoid further relapse, not to wait for some miraculous deus machina or self-correcting solution. I mean, that's why I think this is an important meeting. So I've asked the panelists to reflect on a few important questions, some of which the Deputy Secretary General has already mentioned. How can the immediate and long-term challenge of restoring effective government institutions be achieved? How can the politics of the Central African Republic be rectified to engage both Christian and Muslim communities in a process of durable, widely accepted intercommunal reconciliation? And for the UN, given that the Central African Republic has faced a pattern of international neglect, itself contributing to the collapse of the state, what can the UN and its international regional partners do now and the immediate and medium term to prevent further relapsing into conflict? So you can all think about all those questions while our panelists speak. Each of them will speak for about 8 minutes. There may be one or another remark right up near the front of the room here, and then we will have a Q&A session, and I will do my utmost to finish this at 2:45. So please, Madame Epée, the floor is yours.
Merci, Monsieur l'ambassadeur. Monsieur le secrétaire général des Nations Unies, je vous ai entendu parler. Vous avez dit tout à l'heure que ce panel n'est pas académique. Vous avez raison, parce que moi, je vais parler avec mon cœur. Tout d'abord, je tiens à remercier tous les ambassadeurs qui sont là. Ambassadeur d'Italie, celui du Maroc. Et je tiens aussi à exprimer toute ma gratitude à l'Institut international pour la paix qui me donne aujourd'hui l'opportunité de vous parler de mon pays, la République centrafricaine. Ma présentation va s'articuler sur 2 choses. L'analyse de la situation, mais je ne vais pas aller très loin puisque tout le monde connaît le chaos dans lequel nous vivons aujourd'hui en RCA. Ensuite, je vais proposer quelques pistes de solutions en tant que centrafricaine pour sortir de cette crise et du cercle vicieux que nous vivons depuis quelque temps. Ensuite, je vais conclure vraiment du fond du cœur sur ce que je pense que, ensemble avec vous, avec la communauté internationale, au pied de la RCA, nous pouvons faire pour que la RCA sorte de cette crise et se développe comme les autres pays. Tout d'abord, en décembre 2012, je voudrais revenir sur ce que le secrétaire général a dit tout à l'heure. Pourquoi on n'a pas agi à temps pour éviter ? Et je prends à témoin aujourd'hui Madame Margaret Vogt, qui est dans la salle avec nous, qui était représentante spéciale pour les Nations Unies en Centrafrique et qui a alerté tout le monde au départ. Donc la communauté internationale était informée de ce qui se passait en Centrafrique et la question du secrétaire général est la bienvenue. Pourquoi on n'a pas évité à temps ce que nous cherchons aujourd'hui à corriger? Donc, dans ce chaos, après la prise de pouvoir en mars 2013 par la coalition Seleka, ça s'est passé devant les forces sous-régionales. Il y avait 3 forces en présence en Centrafrique. Il y avait la force de la FOMAC, de la CEAC, les forces amies de l'Afrique du Sud. Il y avait aussi les forces françaises qui étaient là sous un autre mandat pour la protection des civils français présents en Centrafrique. Donc, après, il y a eu l'entrée en scène des milices anti-Balaka que tout le monde a entendu parler, je ne reviens pas dessus, et qui sont surtout un mélange de citoyens villageois, mais intégrés par les forces armées centrafricaines, qui sont beaucoup plus des gens qui étaient de la garde présidentielle du président déchu, et aussi d'autres factions qui sont des autodéfenses qui ne sont pas contrôlées par l'ancien président Bozizé. Et tout ce mélange de gens ont provoqué le 5 décembre un clash en République centrafricaine, et vous avez entendu parler des crimes, des massacres et des déplacements des populations à l'intérieur et à l'extérieur du pays. Et la crise a pris la forme d'un affrontement, d'une confrontation interreligieuse, alors qu'au départ, ce n'était pas interreligieuse. Pourquoi de nouvelles violences et un coup d'État en 2013, alors qu'on a organisé un dialogue politique inclusif en 2008 et des élections législatives et présidentielles en 2011? Ensemble, plusieurs forats ont été organisés en Centrafrique. Mais ces forats qui ont proposé des recommandations, ces recommandations n'ont jamais été appliquées, ou parfois partiellement appliquées. Et c'est le cas du forum inclusif de 2008. En 2011, il y a eu des élections qui ont été organisées, mais mal organisées, truquées, donc qui a créé le mécontentement général de la population. Donc, dans cette dynamique de mobilisation de la communauté internationale que je vois aujourd'hui, je me pose la question, quelles sont les caractéristiques de notre société pour que l'effort de la communauté internationale puisse s'embriguer pour que le pays sorte de cette crise? Je ne sais pas si je me comprends. Vous me comprenez? Parce que tout vient du peuple. Si le peuple est réceptif de tout ce qu'on est en train de faire, l'effort va partir du bas pour aller vers le haut, et ça va ouvrir une voie à cette dynamique que je vois aujourd'hui pour résoudre la crise. Aujourd'hui, il y a un repli identitaire dans notre société. Le rejet de l'autre sur base de religion, de région, de l'ethnie. On parle même de la partition du pays. Aujourd'hui, la violence est devenue un moyen de revendication et de prise de pouvoir. On a vu plusieurs coups d'État successifs dans notre pays. Mais ces coups d'État sont décriés au départ et tout de suite après, les pouvoirs en place sont reconnus. Ça n'aide pas non plus les gens à arrêter cette spirale de violence comme moyen de prise de pouvoir. Nous avons vu l'instrumentalisation de nos jeunes et l'enrôlement des femmes et des enfants. Et nous avons aussi vu un État faible face à tout ça et l'absence des autorités sur l'ensemble du pays. On parlait de Centrafrique, mais Centrafrique restait dans la capitale Bangui. Les facteurs des crises récurrentes chez nous. J'ai essayé de réfléchir et j'ai pensé à un manque de vision pour un avenir commun entre Centrafricains. La perspective de la citoyenneté centrafricaine qui crée des inégalités entre Centrafricains. On a réfléchi aussi, moi j'ai pensé à l'identité nationale. C'est des sujets qui fâchent, mais il faut régler une fois pour toutes. La conception et la place des forces armées dans la construction de la démocratie et la stabilité des institutions nationales, et aussi le sentiment d'appartenir à une même nation, capable d'assumer sa diversité. Comme analyse aussi de la situation, je parle de la mauvaise gouvernance qui avec comme corollaire un clivage entretenu entre la capitale et le reste du pays. L'absence de transparence et de l'obligation de rendre compte de la gestion publique. Ça, c'est très important dans ce pays, la RCA. Aussi, l'impunité et les pratiques de prédation des fonds publics avec l'enrichissement illicite des dirigeants dans un contexte de grande pauvreté. Aussi, le métier des armes est un raccourci pour l'ascension sociale. On a vu les différents rebelles devenir du jour au lendemain des généraux, des colonels, et ça attire les jeunes à faire pareil. Le recours aux forces armées, aux groupes armés étrangers. C'est vrai, notre position centrale avec des frontières poreuses facilite l'entrée des groupes armés qui viennent vendre leurs services à celui qui veut prendre le pouvoir. Aussi, il y a eu je parlais tout à l'heure, il y a eu des forats sur la RCA et des recommandations non tenues. Donc, il y a le non-respect par les parties en conflit des engagements pris et de la parole donnée dans le règlement des conflits en Centrafrique. Ensuite, les causes conjoncturelles de la crise en RCA. La proximité réelle ou supposée des communautés musulmanes et peuls avec des rebelles de la coalition Séléka, c'est parce qu'il y a eu beaucoup de frustrations accumulées pendant de nombreuses années par ces communautés, malgré leur domination économique sur le plan économique, Et c'est ça qui explique en partie leur proximité avec les rebelles quand ils sont arrivés. Et surtout que les chefs rebelles sont tous presque de confession musulmane. Donc, la rancœur de la population non musulmane des FACA et de la famille du président déchu, victime des pillages et autres, la faiblesse du gouvernement de mettre fin aux exactions et la découverte des charniers. Effectivement, le gouvernement qui a pris le pouvoir après le président déchu n'a pas pu régler les problèmes. Au contraire, quand Doto Dia est parti, on a trouvé des charniers dans lesquels se trouvaient, ils ont tué des membres de la famille du président déchu, des gens de la confession chrétienne, des éléments des forces armées centrafricaines. Tout ça, ça a monté la rancœur contre la population musulmane. Aussi, il y a l'un des facteurs, les programmes qui ne réussissent jamais. Ou bien c'est inachevé, ou bien il y a l'insuffisance des ressources. C'est le DDR et la RSS. Le DDR en Centrafrique n'a pas pu être réalisé normalement parce que où on a eu les moyens pour le DD, il n'y a pas de moyens pour la réinsertion, où les gens détournent l'argent, donc ils ne font pas le programme. Donc, tous ces programmes non faits, et surtout au niveau du Nord, les gens du Nord ont pris les armes parce qu'il était programmé un DDR au Nord et le programme n'a pas été réalisé. Aujourd'hui, on est sur le terrain et il y a la complexité des belligérants. On parle d'Anti-Balaka, on parle de Séléka, mais qui sont leurs chefs? Les chefs qu'on voit, en général, souvent ne sont pas des vrais chefs, puisque à chaque réunion, il y a des gens qui contestent. Donc, sur le terrain, on a appris qu'il y a eu... vous avez appris qu'il y a eu une réunion de la coalition Séléka qui a mis en place un état-major. Mais tout de suite, on a vu des divisions entre eux. Les anti-Balaka non plus c'est pas, on voit les anti-Balaka proches de Bozizé, mais il y a des anti-Balaka qui sont des groupes d'autodéfense infiltrés par les FACA, mais qui se réclament d'autres chefs. Donc, les solutions, j'ai proposé 10 recommandations. C'est vrai, il y a l'annonce de l'arrivée des forces de la MINUSCA, mais dans un premier temps, cette crise doit être réglée sur le plan régional. Comme a écrit le chercheur français Roland Marshall, si rien n'est fait pour améliorer la situation au Darfour et au Tchad, il y a peu d'espoir pour une solution nationale. Et ça, j'y crois. Le Darfour aujourd'hui est devenu un sanctuaire de mercenaires prêts à vendre leurs services pour les gens qui veulent s'attaquer au Tchad, à la RCA. C'est l'endroit où on peut trouver les armes qu'il faut pour s'attaquer aux différents pays. Et c'est aussi un nid de rebelles qui sont contre les pouvoirs qui sont autour du Darfour. Donc, si on ne résout pas le problème du Darfour, ça sera difficile aussi de résoudre le problème de la RCA. Deuxièmement, je voudrais que, avant l'arrivée des casques bleus de l'ONU, qu'on puisse imposer le cessez-le-feu à tous les belligérants, avant de commencer à les désarmer. Aujourd'hui, on parle de désarmement, mais les gens s'affrontent toujours. Ensuite, il faut que le gouvernement de transition respecte les accords politiques signés. Nous avons une feuille de route de la transition qui est composée de 4 piliers. La sécurité, le premier pilier, c'est la sécurité et la consolidation de la paix. Le deuxième pilier, c'est l'aide humanitaire aux populations. Le troisième pilier, c'est la politique et la gouvernance. Et le quatrième pilier, c'est la relance économique. Donc, il faut que le gouvernement de transition mette sa part, respecte les engagements pour qu'on aille aux élections en 2015, comme c'est prévu. En quatrièmement, il faut construire une démocratie à la base afin de donner la légitimité aux élus locaux pour promouvoir un développement économique local. J'ai entendu parler l'ambassadeur qui a parlé du processus Kimberley. C'est vrai, on a des ressources, il faut que ces ressources soient bien exploitées et il faut qu'on suspende ce processus pour aider la RCA à avoir des ressources. Parce qu'aujourd'hui, c'est les chefs de guerre qui gagnent, puisque le pays ne peut pas lui-même exporter les biens. Moderniser l'administration. Moderniser l'administration, c'est investir sur les capacités, l'éducation, les infrastructures, les nouvelles technologies, et pour promouvoir une gouvernance inclusive qui prend en compte tous les fils et filles de la RCA. Parce que ça aussi, ça a fâché nos frères les musulmans qui se sont sentis exclus comme citoyens. Et c'est vrai, moi ça je reconnais. Ensuite, reconstruire une armée nationale républicaine et loyale, multi-ethnique, fidèle aux institutions politiques, qui pourra œuvrer au renforcement de celles-ci dans le cadre des programmes DDR et RSS. Ensuite, s'attaquer aux racines des crises, c'est-à-dire la pauvreté. Mettre un terme à l'impunité à travers une justice plus professionnelle, plus indépendante et de proximité, et favoriser la réparation des victimes. Neuvièmement, instaurer la culture de l'alternance démocratique, apaisée, en favorisant des élections libres, démocratiques et transparentes, parce que les élections de 2011 ont été truquées et le peuple n'a pas été d'accord. Dixièmement, enfin, investir dans le redéploiement des services étatiques dans toutes les régions. Construire une infrastructure nationale pérenne de médiation, de prévention et de résolution de conflits et de dialogue politique permanent. Ça manque. Les politiques ne dialoguent pas entre eux et souvent, c'est les fractures. Je crois que pour faire tout ça, il faut des moyens. Et les moyens, la RCA peut l'avoir si on exploite rationnellement nos ressources et que la solidarité internationale nous accompagne. Je vous remercie.
Well, merci beaucoup, Madame Epée, and you have offered us 10 rather concrete recommendations. This was part of what we were pushing for in this meeting here. So we're now going to hear from Joao Hanwana how the UN looks at either these recommendations or the UN's own recommendations and how best to proceed. Joao.
Thank you. Thank you very much, John, and thank you also for inviting me to participate in this important meeting. I would have very few comments. Can you hear me? The voice will come as we move. Please be patient. But I was saying that I will have very few comments and maybe just one recommendation, understanding that obviously we all are aware of what the situation is in the Central African Republic. We know the history of this conflict. And I would just say that the Central African Republic is probably a very dramatic illustration of how difficult it is to achieve the fundamental objective of peace building, which is precisely to help societies in crisis, fragile societies to relapse, to help them prevent relapsing into conflict. And for all our efforts, for all the investment of the international community, including the United Nations, but not exclusively, in trying to help this society do exactly that for a number of years, the reality is that we are in the presence of recurring episodes of extreme violence, and there is no need really to belabor this point. We all know what is happening. We all know what has happened in this country in the recent past. Now, I think it is also accepted, certainly in UN circles, that for peace building to succeed, it has to contain some important features. And we talk about national ownership, we talk about the development of national capacities for conflict prevention, conflict management, conflict resolution. We talk about the importance of our approach, the quality of the strategy, and the quality of the activities that we engage in precisely to achieve those objectives. And we talk about having resources that are commensurate with the requirements of the situation. And we have heard in the comments of the previous speaker how important it is. What I would suggest is that if we look at our track record in the Central African Republic in this regard, in the light of the requirements for effective peace building, I think we will be forced to recognize that we hardly meet any one of these criteria that we ourselves established for success. And this calls for a reflection on whether or not the instruments that we have, the investment that we have made, really are up to really respond to the challenge. In the case of the Central African Republic, and why is it that in some other cases we have succeeded to a much larger extent that we are doing in the Central African Republic? I would just concentrate on two of these elements of success, particularly national ownership and national capacities. Just to say that it is obvious from experience and from what we have been learning as we practice peace building that national ownership is probably the single most important source of the political will for peace. To the extent that we fail to really ensure this national ownership, we are jeopardizing the creation of this political will for peace. And therefore, the key national actors who have to be our partners in these efforts will be distracted by whatever issues continue to divide them, very often because they have not been involved in the search for solutions. And the critics of some of the, for example, the peace accords that have been achieved in the search for solutions in the Central African Republic will say that, well, these peace accords were largely the result of discussions and negotiations where the voices of external actors were much more powerful than the voices of internal constituencies in the Central African Republic. And we know what the result is. Very often, some of these key constituencies, instead of becoming constituencies for peace, become spoilers because they don't recognize themselves in the agreements that we are trying to help implement. So this issue of national ownership, it's not just an issue of rhetoric because it's politically correct to talk about national, but it's a fundamental requirement for success. The other issue is the issue of national capacities. And in this regard, I mean, we often complain with good reason that, well, you know, these societies, because they are fragile, because their development is very low, the levels of development, they don't have internal resources to undertake what it takes really to consolidate peace and to prevent the relapse into protracted violence. And it's largely true. But it's also true that very often we fail to recognize those few resources that exist in those countries. And in the case of the Central African Republic, it's important for us to remind ourselves of the successful national political dialogues that were undertaken to a certain degree, fairly successful, both in 2003 and in 2008. In the case of 2008, for example, it didn't go too far, not because of lack of internal engagement of a number of political forces, but because of the fact that one of the key players was not interested in the implementation of the agreement in the first place. But the point being to say that we have to continue to make efforts to identify and engage those internal resources, the little internal resources that exist to build those constituencies for peace. That will, I believe, immensely enhance success in our endeavors. And this is also based in the observation of those cases in which we did exactly that. I mean, the effectiveness of our action was immensely enhanced. My only recommendation in the light of this is, I mean, it could come in one word. I mean, beyond all the other recommendations that we heard and we clearly entirely subscribe, there is one asset that is not very expensive, but it's fundamental in these kinds of processes, and that's patience. Patience, not in terms of a call for indifference in the face of extreme violence and violations of human rights and so on and so forth, but patience in terms of, first of all, the ability of making the effort to listen to those internal voices in these settings that we're trying to help, and engaging them and involving them, much as that might be difficult. Patience in terms of also trying to listen to the immediate neighbors of Central African Republic and understand their concerns and see to what extent those concerns can be harmonized with our own objectives and with the objectives of consolidating peace in Central African Republic. For the obvious reason that if those concerns are not taken into account, also the chances are that some of those players will become spoilers, as has been the case in many other settings. Patience in terms of investing in building the necessary alliances and networks that eventually will produce success. Patience to be able to work with others and maximize the inputs that others can bring. In other words, patience, I mean, the humility to accept that we are not the only one, the only actor that has a contribution to make in these processes. patience also John made a comment here that the span of attention of the international community is short. And we have to understand that in the face of the many crises we are confronted with. And I would say that in this case, patience is called for, precisely for us to resist the impulse of rapidly giving up on the Central African Republic and considering it a basket case. I would say that it is encouraging to see this level of attention being paid to the Central African Republic over the last 12 months, maybe, which was not there for many, many years. And I hope that we will have the patience to continue to pay this attention and continue to seek for solutions despite the setbacks, despite the difficulties, despite the complexity of the challenge we are dealing with. Thank you.
Well, Joel, thank you very much. You know, my own comment about short attention span and your comment on patience, it's a matter of whether there will be sustained engagement or whether what I call the international community will just go off to the next issue, whether it's Mali or Darfur or Somalia. I mean, there are a lot of other topics. You all know that. That's why I wanted to highlight the need to try to do something now, even though nothing's going to just be solved, quote unquote, in 60 days. Let's hear from Andrea here, and then we'll come around, like to speak, and then we'll open the floor. Andrea.
Thank you. I definitely resonate with what we heard, and I'm quite impressed by the presence here. And I would like to use a little piece of my 8 minutes to invite a moment of silence in this peace-building day, thinking of all the victims in Central African Republic, but also the victims from the UN system. The people that gave their life for something more important than themselves, people that were caught into this tragic idea that actually things can be made better by using violence, that people can be liberated by killing others and even genociding many in order to create a new system. Thank you. And this silence is important to me because I think that if we do not delink violence and state building, we are not making much progress. If we believe that state building is primarily an effort of somebody to gain power through violence, then welcome to Central African Republic yesterday. Well, I would like to present a slightly more provocative view of what is happening in Bangui and in Central African Republic today, because it is my impression that President Samba Panza did not come to power with an army. She was not one of the others that came so often, treating the country as it was a personal property, treating countries as if it was, as Mao Zedong said, on the battle of the rifle. She's the first attempt of creating an inclusive politics. It's a complicated experiment, a very difficult experiment. It's a very delicate experiment. But I think that, and I was delighted, thank you, Ambassador Kari, for putting the two together, Central African Republic and the future of peace building. That a lot of the future of peace building will be in the capacity that we have to hear the desire of the people in Central African Republic to have a polity that is not governed by violence, that is not decided by violence first. It's a very simple idea. But it's a transformational idea in Central African Republic. power that was not given to people in an elections, and when elections were done, they were not welcomed by the people because they were rigged. So, first, we have a president that was not coming to power through violent means. One. Two, we do not have, and I hope we will not have, a genocide. The international community call on attention on this. And I know that the Deputy Secretary General was very concerned about the movement of people. But if you can move people, people are not killed. And it's better to have a person somewhere else than have a person dead where he is. Genocide happened in closed systems. Systems that do not adjust, systems where there is no movement. Well, we didn't see that in Central African Republic, partially because the United Nations and others intervened saying there is a danger, we need to intervene. Too late, I agree. Late warnings. But still, I think it's very important to say that the Central African Republic that we see today is a system that is open to possible evolutions. We didn't do what we were supposed to do. Margaret is right. We were supposed to do it better in the past, absolutely. But we have a system at the moment that can evolve. So why not thinking Central African Republic the same way we saw Macedonia long ago, when Macedonia was able to invent preventive deployment, avoiding the worst before it came. It is clearly too late. But why not hope that with Ambassador Patriota's leadership, the Peacebuilding Commission will be able to offer the leadership that can only provide the long-term solutions. And honestly, John, I believe that the international community is more than just a fad. The international community is going to be interested in Central African Republic even more if Central African Republic can become the symbol of what can happen. A terrible case, in many cases, a worst case scenario in many different trends, for regional reason, for exploitive reason, for the past experience, but still so many reasons to hope. And a lot of people on the ground willing to invest on the possibility of coexistence. The Saint of Bangui, that were recently here, are speaking with ECOSOC today, and still there is this desire of the communities to find a way. So why not thinking Central African Republic as a way to experiment with what is coming? And I believe that the idea that the world is in the making needs to come to us. The idea that, yes, there is power in divided impera, but the real way to govern is actually to unite. It is only when you have the capacity to unite that you really can govern. And guess what? The countries are made by many people, by those who are in that country, and by many who are observing in an intelligent and competent way. I want to tell a story as an Italian immigrant to the US. Puzzled and intrigued by Myrdal's study of race relation in the US with Ralph Bunche, of anyone. A Swedish guy studying the US with somebody that will become a gift of humanity through the United Nations system, and African-American leaders. An American leader. Who was making who? America is a better country today, 50 years after the civil rights movement, because of Gunnar Myrdal's study and Ralph Bunche's study. States are not made only by the powerful one. That's my point. IPI is helping Central African Republic to be. The more we keep the attention, the more we will find solutions that can be sustainable. Sant'Egidio is dedicated to speaking with everybody. And I was explaining before that recently Muslim leaders from Central African Republic visited Rome. And that sometimes it's good to speak with everybody in the same room, sometimes it's good to speak with somebody privately. but is always indispensable to speak with everyone for a long time. The Peacebuilding Commission has an extraordinary opportunity, and we are delighted in many ways that we can contribute to it. Thank you.
So we've now had 5 speakers, the Deputy Secretary General and Ambassador Cardi, and our 3 panelists, all of whom have tried to infuse some energy into where the situation in the Central African Republic goes from today forward. And these very useful 10 suggestions you made that we're going to post them in our report. So I'd like to invite the Ambassador of Morocco, who is the chair of the configuration for the Central African Republic in the Peacebuilding Commission, to say a few words. So if you'd like to come, Ambassador Hilali, and welcome.
Je ne vais pas pouvoir dire plus que ce que nous avons entendu par les différents panélistes, mais j'ai 3 ou 4 observations. La première, c'est la situation au Mali. La situation en Centrafrique. Pendant des décennies, ce pays était un corps malade. Actuellement, c'est un cœur qui meurt. La République centrafricaine est en train de mourir s'il n'y a pas une action urgente de la part de la communauté internationale et des Nations Unies. Le danger est là et nous devons réagir. J'ai 3 principes ou 3 observations à faire. Tout d'abord, l'appropriation nationale, dont a parlé notre collègue la ministre, ainsi que d'autres panélistes. Il y a un déficit, malheureusement, d'appropriation nationale pour tous les efforts de la communauté internationale. J'étais récemment à Genève et j'avais parlé avec l'experte du Conseil, experte indépendante pour la République centrafricaine, qui a été nommée par le Conseil des droits de l'homme. Et il a été, en quelque sorte, surprise, désolé qu'il n'a pas trouvé d'élite avec qui parler, n'a pas trouvé de responsables politiques avec qui voir avec eux la vision, le travail à faire en commun pour relever le pays et trouver des solutions aussi bien du côté de la communauté chrétienne que de la communauté musulmane. Et ce déficit, cette faiblesse d'appropriation nationale va impacter toutes les solutions, toutes les réflexions qui seront faites pour trouver des solutions pour le pays, pour que le post-conflit puisse s'installer, pour qu'il y ait la reconstruction des institutions de l'État. Deuxième observation, c'est la faiblesse de la mobilisation de la communauté internationale, notamment en ce qui concerne l'assistance financière et alimentaire. Et je vous invite cet après-midi à assister au dialogue de haut niveau au sein du Conseil, l'ECOSOC, auquel va participer M. Antonio Guterres, le haut-commissaire pour les réfugiés, parce qu'on a une session sur l'urgence de l'assistance humanitaire. Et son constat, vous allez écouter, est vraiment dramatique. Malheureusement, il y a des millions et des millions qui sont annoncés lorsqu'il y a le fundraising meetings, mais la concrétisation, parfois, ne dépasse pas 20% ou bien 25%. Si, heureusement, il y a la mobilisation des pays africains qui ont aidé énormément. À un certain moment, il n'y avait même pas de possibilité de payer les fonctionnaires, pas de possibilité d'acheter des médicaments, pas de possibilité de trouver quelqu'un pour l'enseignement et les hôpitaux. Donc, il y a cette faiblesse de mobilisation, mais également il y a une faiblesse de mobilisation pour sécuriser le pays. Je vous dirais que pratiquement, surtout dans les zones où il y a les 2 communautés, et c'est là où il y a le problème. Là où il y a les 2 communautés, il n'y a pratiquement plus de vie en commun. Il n'y a pratiquement plus d'écoles, il n'y a pratiquement plus d'hôpitaux, il n'y a pratiquement plus d'institutions judiciaires, parce que tout simplement, chacune des communautés a peur, elle craint pour sa vie, il n'y a pas suffisamment de protection pour ces communautés. Et nous espérons, notre grand espoir, ce serait l'arrivée des forces de maintien de la paix des Nations Unies au mois de septembre. C'est regrettable que cela se fasse plus tard, parce qu'entre le moment où cela a été décidé ici à New York et le moment où ils arriveront au mois de septembre, le nombre des victimes sera en centaines, pour ne pas dire en milliers de personnes. En plus, comme l'a dit M. député secrétaire général, il y a un nettoyage religieux dramatique pour l'avenir du pays. 2 communautés qui se séparent, il y a maintenant un gouffre entre eux, le nord qui est en train pratiquement d'être par les musulmans, le sud par les chrétiens. Et c'est pour l'avenir, pour trouver une solution, pour permettre également à ces gens de retourner dans leur village, dans leur quartier. Ça va être une mission, encore une mission dans la mission, le maintien de la paix, qui sera très difficile à réaliser. Dernière observation, l'urgence d'agir. Nous avons entendu ici plusieurs observations sur la nécessité d'agir ensemble. Il faut qu'il y ait une action collective, pas seulement de la communauté internationale, l'ONU, mais également des pays régionaux, l'Union africaine, les institutions financières, pour en quelque sorte apporter les moyens nécessaires pour des objectifs également clairs. Il faut qu'il y ait une clarté dans les objectifs politiques à faire, également à établir un certain nombre de priorités pour la réconciliation nationale. Et nous pensons que la réconciliation nationale et religieuse, c'est deux piliers pour la solution politique. Hors de ces deux réconciliations, on peut penser toutes les solutions politiques magiques possibles, il y aura difficulté à y parvenir. Je dirais également urgence, parce que tout simplement, la menace terroriste est là. Et c'est dommage que l'on n'accorde pas suffisamment d'intérêt aux menaces qui pèsent sur ce pays. La pénétration du courant fondamentaliste et extrémiste, la pénétration, l'intérêt de Boko Haram et surtout l'appel de solidarité de Boko Haram pour aider la communauté musulmane là-bas doit nous interpeller, doit attirer notre attention afin que nous voyions dans la solution politique les efforts de la communauté internationale et des Nations Unies une urgence à faire le plus rapidement possible. La clé de tout cela, c'est la mobilisation, c'est l'action en commun et surtout des clartés dans les objectifs et une cohérence dans les actions des pays de la région. Nous avons entendu parler tout à l'heure qu'il faut qu'il y ait une appropriation régionale. C'est vrai, on a besoin d'une appropriation régionale, mais nous n'avons pas besoin d'une compétition régionale, mais nous n'avons pas besoin non plus de télescopage des initiatives régionales parce que cela risque tout simplement de neutraliser non pas les propositions de solutions des organisations sous-régionales de l'Union africaine, mais également des Nations Unies. C'est une cohérence, une coordination à tous les niveaux, c'est la clé pour aider ce pays à se relever. Et nous avons tous, et là je conclus, une responsabilité collective. Parce que si nous n'arrivons pas, quand je dis nous, Nations Unies, pays pris individuellement au sein du continent africain, si nous n'arrivons pas à aider ce pays à sortir de sa crise, le continent risque de le payer très cher. Parce que comme l'a souligné M. Yann Eliasson, c'est pas pour rien qu'on l'a appelé l'Afrique centrale. Il est le cœur de ce qui se passe et ce qui va se passer en Afrique pour les années à venir. Soit la paix sera rétablie et toute la région va être impactée positivement, soit il y aura un échec des efforts de la communauté internationale, et il y aura une déstabilisation généralisée au sud et également vers le Maghreb, l'Afrique du Nord et la Méditerranée. Et cela, les conséquences, je ne pourrais pas vous en parler parce que tout simplement, je n'aimerais pas y penser à ce scénario catastrophe. Je vous remercie, ambassadeur H.
Merci beaucoup. Well, Ambassador Halali, thank you very much for your remarks, your focus on the regional situation here. I'd like to, I'm going to stay for about 15 more minutes to give a few of you the chance to ask a question or make a brief observation, if you would like. So let's take right here. And if you just introduce yourself and a short question.
My name is Jordan Ryan. I'm the director of UNDP's Bureau for Crisis Prevention and Recovery. I'm delighted that the turnout is here. I mean, I think 4 years ago when the first,
Just speak up.
yeah. When the first chair of the PBC for Central African Republic would ever chair a meeting, you'd never get 5 people in the room. I mean, just a sea change. But Madam Pei, I think hearing some of the discussion today, this sort of, is there patience? Is there the international community's continuance of sort of a CNN moment that they pay attention for about 10 seconds. I wonder do you see in the Central African Republic an ability to have a new partnership, both using the G7 plus sort of principles of state building, peace building, but a new partnership that would use the natural resources of Central African Republic, refuse to have those be at the beck and call of a single minister to gain wealth for himself, to have a new dispensation of the wealth of Central African Republic be perhaps monitored by whether discussed at the PBC or found a way to actually have the wealth of the country for the people of the country. And how would you see the wealth that your country has used, as you say, for the people in a different way? And that, to me, would turn the equation so that the international community might well stay the course if the wealth of the country was actually being used for the people. If there's any way that you see a possibility of a new joined up action. Thank you.
Margaret? Can you give Margaret Volk the microphone?
No, thank you very much, and I really appreciate the turnout. It's a delight. Just two quick questions. I really applaud Joao's emphasis on the importance of national appropriation, because he's right. If one looks down the history, one of the biggest tragedies of Central Africa is that we've had a lot of internationally imposed solutions. How do we get there? Because the framework that we are working with is also internationally imposed. Why is it that the National Transitional Council, for example, cannot do more to put its own mark on the transitional process? And secondly, the talk about elections. If we were really to consult the Central African people, would they be discussing elections next year? Is this something realistic? And what is the implication of putting this on the agenda at this time? And finally, the funding of the CAP, the humanitarian assistance, I understand, is only about 25% funded. How hopeful are we that we would get the resources to do the enormous task that we need to undertake in the Central African Republic? I share Bartoli's optimism, but in the face of support and consistent and long-term support, will we get there?
Just one more, and then we're going to go back to the panel. Or two more, I guess, the gentleman back there. So, Jeffrey, just introduce yourself.
Okay, Jeff Laurenti. And given that both Jan Eliasson and Ambassador Cardi had at the outset put this discussion in the context of the Peace Building Commission as institutionally, may I just ask the members of the panel, and maybe Margaret, was the political class, the adversarial political class in Central African Republic, really that much more intractable, that much more untrustworthy, that much more suspicious, that much more faithless than the parties that have been reluctantly dragged to making peace agreements in other countries that have fallen under the PBC jurisdiction? Or does this reflect does CAR's descent into madness, if you will, reflect a problem here in New York? We all know that it's very hard to get CAR on the radar screen generally, but there was no mention of the efforts of the previous configuration leadership, the Belgians, I guess it was, to try to either keep this alive in the Security Council or try to bring pressure on folks in Bangui. Was there something that might have been done differently from there that could have had any impact as things unfolded?
David Donat-Cattin, Secretary General of Parliamentarians for Global Action. we very proudly have Madame Ebaye among our membership, and we would like to, I would like to follow up on one point that she made in connection with also what the Deputy Secretary General said before, to try to learn lessons from the mistakes of the past. When she said that the DDR programs did not include the R component, that a lot of investment was made to disarm and demobilize, but not enough to rehabilitate. And here is the quest that 1 month ago at the GA, in a meeting organized with the informal groups of the Friends of the ICC Sweden, hosted, the chair of our group, Mr. Pascal Gimasse from Bangui, said that the victims have been left behind. All the recommendations that we discussed, Madame Ebaye, when we were together in Bangui with the president of the Peace Building Commission, who came in October 2011 in a Parliamentarians of Global Action meeting with 84 parliamentarians out of the 114 of the parliament at the time, the main complaint was, why was the recommendation of the État Général de la Justice not implemented? Why don't we have a national anti-impunity program? Why do we allow the LRA, which is the Christian fundamentalists, to come in from the DRC and live with impunity and occupy villages, kidnap children, and function, as we saw it after, as a model for the Seleka? So this lack of follow-up, I think, is the main problem that we have. The last question I have for you is France. Why nobody mentioned the role that France played so far in somehow preventing the escalation of the violence? Thank you.
I'm going to give each of you a chance to answer, but I want to just add one more thought, because your emphasis was heavily on national leadership and ownership, and I believe, Andrea, yours was as well. But Madame Ebaye said, if I got it correctly, that there must be a regional solution, that there cannot be a solution to the Central African Republic without a regional solution. I believe that's what you said. And what I don't get is, well, first of all, is whether you agree with that. And secondly, of course, all the UN operations are stovepiped by country. We have a project in Mali. You have, the UN has a project in Mali. It has a project in Cote d'Ivoire, a project in the CAR, peace of. So what's your sort of view of that? Does there have to be a regional solution? And is the UN going to be able to do that? So do you want to say, vous voulez commencer? You can just answer ce que vous voulez. Okay.
Merci. Je voudrais essayer de répondre au directeur du PNUD qui a parlé tout à l'heure. Vous savez, dans cette construction de la nouvelle RCA, nous sommes en train d'élaborer un nouveau texte de la Constitution. Nous avons remarqué qu'il y a une forte concentration du pouvoir au niveau de l'exécutif, et surtout que ce pouvoir dans la gestion du pouvoir, surtout que les présidents en question, dans les anciennes constitutions, s'accaparaient du pouvoir et autour de leurs proches. Et cette fois-ci, nous voulons qu'il y ait, qu'au niveau de l'exécutif, qu'il y ait un mécanisme de rendre compte. Jusqu'à présent, personne ne rend compte aux populations. Donc, il faudra intégrer dans les nouveaux textes les questions d'impunité, de la justice qui est faite que pour les plus forts. Tout ça, on va prendre en compte. Et tout à l'heure, je parlais de la décentralisation du pouvoir. Il faut qu'on mette des textes sur la décentralisation pour que le pouvoir revienne à la base, que le peuple puisse s'approprier de son sort, de son avenir. Ça n'existe pas. En 54 ans d'indépendance, il y a eu 2 élections municipales au niveau des maires. Juste après les élections, après l'indépendance, en 1962, il y a eu ces élections, mais sous un parti unique. En 1988, il y a eu une autre élection, mais sous un parti unique. Donc le peuple n'a jamais eu ses représentants élus. Donc aujourd'hui, On voit seulement des élections présidentielles, législatives, et on s'arrête. Donc, il faut ramener le pouvoir à la base. Je crois que si le pouvoir va au peuple, il y aura plus de contrôle et nos ressources seront gérées rationnellement. C'est la réponse que je peux vous donner.
Très bien. Merci beaucoup. Just one minute each, and then we'll wrap this up.
Okay. Okay, 1 minute then. In terms of the regional solution versus national ownership, I think they're not mutually exclusive. The point for me is that whatever the solution is, and the solution has many aspects and many elements to it, but it's fundamental that key national actors buy into it. They cannot be alien to the development of that solution. That is the fundamental point. And of course, the solution has to take into account the concerns and the interests of the immediate neighbors of the Central African Republic. It's history, that's what it is. The history of Central African Republic is one of very intimate and difficult relationship with some of its neighbors. And that cannot be undone easily or quickly. So any solution for the crisis in the Central African Republic has to take that into account. Now, I'm not saying that it's an easy proposition. I'm just saying that it's a necessary step. And difficult as it is, and this is why the emphasis on patience, because these are intractable, difficult problems that don't lend themselves to easy and quick fixes. If we don't take the long-term view, and if we are not prepared to engage and stay the course, then it's almost better not to engage. That would be how dramatically I would put it. But definitely there has to be a combination of that. And of course, beyond that, and somebody mentioned France and others, beyond the immediate region, there is the interest of the African Union, be it in terms of the normative agenda of the African Union, be it in terms of the debates that happen within the African Union, and the broader international community. The traditional partners of the Central African Republic, one way or the other. I mean, France, we spoke about France, the European Union, who has invested a lot of effort in trying to help. All these partners have interests, have concerns that have to be taken into account when we are looking for solutions in this case. And the secret here is, how do we harmonize all these different interests? Precisely to build, it's the same thing as we look at the different interests of the internal actors. It's only by finding the necessary compromises that we will move these internal actors from enmity and conflict to some form of cooperation in building peace. Similarly for the other actors in the outer circles. It's maybe too simplistic, but that's the way I see it. It's just by harmonizing all these different interests that we can eventually make progress. Thank you.
Just one minute, then we're wrapping up here. Andrea.
Thank you. What I heard Mr. Payet to say is that the first ownership problem in Central African Republic is of the state by the people. It's not just an international issue. And in that sense, I totally agree that what we see is an experiment of a possibility that is made exactly because the international community is saying, no more coup d'etat, no more military solution, no more ways in which you get the state as private ownership. That, I think, is changing big for Central African Republic and beyond.
Well, thank you, Andrea. Well, we've had quite an afternoon here. We've had 3 permanent representatives. We've had the Deputy Secretary General. We've had a full house. As was said earlier, 5 years ago, PBC meetings would have had 5 people. So this shows a lot of interest. And we've had these 10 recommendations, which I really thank you for. And again, thank you for coming all the way from Bangui. And my thanks to our 2 other speakers here, Andrea Joao. So and thank you all for being here. So let's give them a big hand.